And there we go. All right.
All right.
Blasted machine.
The meeting
Yeah,
is being live streamed. Got it. All right.
you bet
Fantastic. We are live, which is
that we
fantastic.
are. And it's nice to catch up with Franco again. Anyone who's been on the, seen a video before knows that Franco has been here before, and he'll be just as cool now as he was then. Or your money back.
Or your money back. That's a wasn't it the show must go on or we'll have to give the money back? It's
Yeah,
actually
right. Yeah,
yeah,
right. Yeah, we need to get somebody out there because I don't want to have to empty this booth full of money.
Yeah, no, and that was a carnival thing, if I'm not mistaken. That was one of the
Yeah.
old traveling circus things that happened a lot. For sure.
Funny
Oh
you
my
bring up
God,
circus. The table I just had yesterday, we spent the last 2 sessions at a carnival, and I'm really happy. It was going to be one, but the players love the carnival so much they refused to leave, which is really nice.
Okay.
I'm glad they're having fun. So I had to pull more carnival games out of my butt because I was not prepared for another 2 hours of carnival games.
Funny, I was discussing carnival games and betting games and otherwise in D&D with my brother the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And he completely undervalued how well they work for when you need to curtail or provide resources for a party or for a group of adventurers. When they have way too much money and don't know what to do with it, or they have more money than what your adventure really had planned for it. Rigged carnival games, which can be rigged in their favor or rigged against them according to the needs. Now, you never force them to play, but if if they decide to, it is a good way to kind of turn the levers on the amount of wealth.
One of the players had the carnival game where like the fish are in all the little glass cups and you throw balls into the cups, and if you get one in one that has a fish, you get the fish. One of the players is a druid and took the idea that these poor defenseless fish were having their water berated by thrown spears as disruptive, and I can see their point. So they went up to the carnival guy and they're like, hey, could you do me a favor? I'm all for people winning these things, but could you put them in a larger storage container? And he looked around and said, lady, do I look like I have a larger storage container? I see your plight and everything. You provide the bucket and I will move them over. And that became the quest. To go find an appropriately sized bucket.
You know what? That is actually, of all the quest lines and otherwise, that is not the most, let's say, out of the box that I've seen.
No, it's really not.
But it is only for very self-directed groups. I gotta tell you, that is not something that you can easily integrate into a scheduled, kind of like a module that you're following or like that. It is
things I have learned because players are players. The largest tortilla ever made was like 1.25 miles wide. Buttholes never completely close. And yeah, like they pinch it shut, but they don't seal up. Because the question was, is a rectum an open container? Arguably,
oh
yes.
My lord. Create water, I'm assuming, something like that.
Arguably, yes, they are.
Oh God, okay, all right.
Because they don't clam shut like a clamshell. It's not like that.
Not so. No, that.
And then there was the question that since the end of your bum and the opening of your throat are the two ends of the same tube, basically, is that whole thing one big open container? Assuming your mouth is open. Again, arguably.
So here's the thing, and this is just to I think flex the fact that I'm an EMT. It's not the only valve that closes along the way.
It's true. So, it's not the only. Yeah.
So there's a lot of places where that could
where there is a closing. Right.
this definitely went in a different direction than I thought we were going, but okay.
Yeah, so you were saying recap at the table.
So funny thing, I've been a lot of thought about recapping. So just to let everyone who's listening know, every time that you stop playing, but you have to retake the game later on, whether it be the next week or the next month or whatever it is, a lot of information is lost. A lot of information is just simply forgotten because no one takes perfect notes, not the DM, not the players, not anyone. And so a recap is a little bit more like the beginning of I'm not going to say railroading, but it's the beginning of pointing in the direction that we left off that everyone forgot. Because regardless of what you were doing, the one thing you have to know at the beginning of your game or at the beginning of the particular session is where you're going, is at least where you're pointing. Where you go from there is a series of decisions, but where you're pointing is generally what was left off in the previous session. Now, here's the thing. I have found that there's different uses for recap, and it depends largely on how you're playing and largely on why you're playing. For professional DMs, which I now count myself amongst those, yeah, heck yeah. It is a little bit more about a sense of integrating everyone who's at the table back into the game and letting them know what their immediate objective is so that we can start rolling dice immediately and get the experience of playing off the bat as quickly as possible, because again, that is literally what they're paying for. And that is what you are, the service that you are offering. So you want to start providing it, or at least in their minds, get that service started as soon as possible. However, what happens when you're just playing with your friends? In that case, how important is it to have to, point them in the direction versus simply, this is all the stuff that you know, this is the last thing you did, take it from there. So I do believe that depending on what the objective of the recap is, how it should be presented. So I'm not entirely sure if you had that experience of playing with friends versus the difference of playing with a paid customer and how that impacts the beginning or the kickoff of your session.
So my experience is not different. I provide the exact same one the same way, whether or not I'm playing with just my friends or whether or not it's my job. Which is to say, my friends are here to take my time because I'm willing to give it to them.
For sure.
If like the play table is the same thing, like that session with the carnival was 2 hours long. We spent probably an hour and a half of it rolling dice at the carnival. Oh, who am I kidding? We spent maybe 20 minutes rolling dice, maybe. But we did spend most of it in session. But they took 20 minutes to talk about their lives, and I did not stop them because they buy the time, so they're free to do with it whatever they like. There have been 4-hour sessions where we were in world for maybe 20 minutes. I will probably I will probably bring it up if it goes on for a long time, say longer than 10 minutes at a time. And I'll go, well, how about them dice? And if they all acknowledge me and then we go right back to talking about their lives, then that's clearly what they want to do. And I'm going to shut up. Well, I'm going to bring it up again in maybe 15 minutes. And again, if they all heard me, and we go back to talking about their lives, then that's what they're paying for, and that's okay. Being DM is one part therapist, and I'm okay with that.
You are correct. You absolutely are correct. It is so. But I believe then the difference may lie in the type of customers both you and I have.
It's very possible.
Correct me if I'm mistaken. You're still doing mostly virtual, correct? You're not doing in person.
Yes. All of my stuff is virtual, except for one table that I have with my friends. It's in person again these days. I have one table every other Friday. One day we had to wrap up early, and the leader of that table said, "So we buy your time, right?" I said, "Yes, technically." He went, "Okay, we have to wrap up an hour early, and I paid you already for all of it." I said, "I understand that. Do you want me to send you the difference back?" And he went, No, I bought that hour. Watch the first episode of The Mandalorian." So I did. I said, "That's a 45-minute show." And he went, "I know, 15-minute tip, I guess. There you go."
The Mandalorian. There you go. Make an appearance.
And I do usually try and end a session on a thing that we will talk about immediately at the start of the next one. I don't like to end sessions at the end of fights, rather at the start of fights. Okay. So there'll be something to talk about immediately. You're in a forge and you're all by yourself and you have been for the last 20 minutes searching the place out. And the north wall explodes and lets in a lot of debris and light. See you next week. That is a
cliffhanger.
Hey, thanks. You crest to the top of the hill and you're exhausted and you're tired and you have finally found a place where the dark, rotten trees don't shoot forward with you with vines anymore. And as you take a breath, the sky goes black and there's a deep impression on the ground in front of you as something large lands. See you next week. Stuff like that.
Now, I have to stress this, and I believe that this will make a difference. Your tables are filled with people who know each other.
I mean, now, not when they started.
Well, in that case,
Okay, that's not fair.
that.
I do have some that know each other. The Friday table I just mentioned, everybody there knows each other. They're literally a family. They all live in the same house. Or, well, they did. Now they're old enough to like move out.
Sure,
But
sure,
anyway, they're
sure.
still one family. The other Friday table, because I have 2 alternating Fridays, that one is also a big group of friends. But most of them didn't know each other before we sat down. I have
Fair
something like
enough.
30 tables a month, and only like 4 of them are prearranged friend groups.
Oh, well, then I find that very interesting that your groups take so much time at the beginning of the session to simply talk about, what's going on with each other.
Oh, that's not
If
all
they're
at the
not.
beginning. That's sprinkled throughout the session.
Ah,
They'll have a thought and be like, "Oh, guys, I got this story," and then they tell the story, and somebody else goes, "Oh, that reminds me of X story," and then, the only time I ever make a big fuss about wrapping it up is after we've had one of those. If a player comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm here to roll dice," I say, "Okay, I'll, be louder about it, but I can't
sure.
make a bunch of people shut up without looking like a jerk." So you like, if I will help bolster your voice, but you will need to use your voice.
Good point. Good point. And actually, that's very pertinent to when you have to give information, because in the end, everyone takes notes differently.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the recap can be either given by the DM, which is my style, or it could be asked to be given by a player, which I've played a lot of games in which the DM does not recap. The onus is on the players to where did we leave off. And there's some sort of benefit to it. So, for example, the game that I play on Tuesdays with a friend of mine, he does not. I'm a player. He is the DM. He does not recap. He says, "Hey, well, all right, what happened last time?" And whoever gives the recap and the better details gets inspiration immediately, and you can start. You start rolling. So that's great. So in my case, I don't make an effort to be the one that gets the inspiration, but I do give everyone a pause. Like, all right, no one's going to do this. All right, I'm going to take this and roll with it.
And you're okay with that?
Am I okay with that? Yes. Well, in this case,
That's
this
really
is a table
weird.
of friends. So I'm a
Okay,
player,
that might
and
help.
Phil's a friend of mine.
I draw a really hard line between, like, an unquestionable, I do not step over it hard line between out of game stuff and in-game stuff. I would never dream of giving you inspiration for you talking about the session when you're not in the session. Not a chance. Because that becomes teacher, can I have a sticker? And it's not a mentality I'm willing to endorse. Like,
I guess it does. It does a bit group dependent.
I don't do that. I don't do Dungeon Master. Like, if you bring snacks, you brought snacks because you're hungry, and you brought snacks because it's a cooperative activity, and you're considering other people, and that is reward enough. Like, I'm not going to pay you for that. I kind of bristle at the idea that I would. Like, here's what recap is for, because you are helping everybody else prime their brains for dice. It will be, you're actually paying you. You will have an easier experience, a better experience playing when everybody involved is on the same brainwave. It is a co-op experience. And when people come to play football, actually that's a bad example because you have an opposing team. When people sit down to play a cooperative board game like the Harry Potter deck builder, if somebody's heart's not in it, then that's less fun than if their heart's in it. You shouldn't have to pay them to get that. It feels weird and a little, I brought the teacher an apple, so maybe I get a better grade. It's dirty and I don't like it.
I see the perspective you're on. And you know what? I see why you view it that way. Now, let me just clarify that the game that I'm mentioning, the one that I'm playing on Tuesdays, this is DM'd by a good friend of mine. And the other players, one is his wife. The others are band members that he played with when they were, actually a band that played around. And otherwise, me and one more neighbor. So we all actually come together at my DM's house, and he tells us, "Hey, we're having, we're having hamburgers this week. Someone's got to bring the buns, someone's got to bring the sides. I'm putting the hamburgers, someone bring the drinks." And so that part is more of us getting together and like, hey, we're all getting together. It's not that someone brought snacks; it's we have a meal together.
Right.
So that's not an in-game thing. That's just us getting together.
No, but if you had agreed to bring the bread and you didn't, is he going to take things away from you at the table?
Oh no, absolutely not. No. And that.
But the president exists so that he can, since he can reward. when you say I'll do X, you get something in game Y. That is the same thing as saying if you don't do X, I will
True.
take Y away. It's not something I want to endorse. I don't think it's
True.
wrong. It's just not the way I'm going to do it.
No, and I get that, but what I mean is
I-
that the distinction is that the inspiration in this case is given because you did something for that game, not for the not for the communal getting together and shared experience.
Yeah, I suppose. Then
So-
again, I also like everybody gets a point of inspiration when we sit down. So like every session, every time.
Sure.
Nobody works for it. Nobody gets another one during the session. Here you go. Use it or don't use it. You will grow it. You can only hold one, and you'll grow a new one at the start of next session. So you might as well use it. And that was a thing I started doing because at a 5e tables, because Index Card RPG has a thing called the hero coin that is effectively the same thing.
Sure.
Built right in, and you grow one at the start of every session. And I went, that worked out really well. So I started using it in things that aren't Index Card RPG. Great. They also have the grit die, which works well in ICRPG and would work less well in something with higher numbers. For anyone who hasn't played Index Card RPG, it's a D&D. You've got D20, 6 stats, the whole classes, all that stuff, with the big exception that everything's hit points is lower across the board. For the most part, your damage is lower too. The toughest, most badass monster in the universe has 50 hit points. That's it.
Man.
Fights do not take all day. The biggest, scariest fight with T-Mat's going to take 20 minutes tops. You're either going to win out of the gate or you're going to lose badly out of the gate.
Which if you've ever actually fought someone in real life or done any sort of
that's how
martial
fights
tournament,
go down.
That's how fights go. Yeah, fights
exactly.
You after the first 2 punches, you already know who's going to win.
Right.
Yeah, like you can draw it out for a minute or two, but you already know. Yeah,
right.
Sure. Absolutely, which I think is a great system, by the way. I have not run or played Index RPG. I have leafed through it, and I have adopted a couple of little, not mechanics. I have to say, I've adopted a couple of philosophies, and they are very, very, very compelling for quick play.
So
now,
they have
something.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. And actually, you mentioned something that I had to write down because if not, I was going to forget. But it was to get on the same brainwave. And I do believe that is one of the principal functions of a beginning of session recap.
Right.
So that you get everyone to start actually, all right, we're going to start thinking about this, which is the game.
Right. Part of the reason I have players do that is because that's the only way. Well, not the only way. It's an easy way to get them to tell me what they actually think without me asking. You ever ask somebody a direct question and have their brain go, they want to answer you, they just can't. Okay, skip that by asking them an indirect question about the thing you want the answer to, and watch them give you the answer anyway. It is really easy to get the truth from somebody when you don't ask them a question. So instead of asking players, hey, what do you think? What did you think of NPC? What did you think of that scenario? I want those answers. Curation is easier with feedback.
For sure.
But when I do that, there's a lot of things to consider. Their brain locks up, some of them. They don't want to be rude, stuff like that. So instead of, also, we're in a big group setting. So a guy who might be willing to tell you the truth and be savage about it, I appreciate that, might not in a room full of 4 other people. So instead of saying, hey guys, what did you think about encounter X or trap Y? I say, who wants to cover what happened last time? And then they'll talk about what happened last time. And they'll say something like, well, we met this creepy mage. And I go, I did not mean to present him as creepy. That's useful information.
Yes.
And that works out really well when one player says, oh, he's going to fuck us later. And all the other players go, no, he's just weird. Now I get to decide who gets to go, see, I told you in 3 months. Right.
In 3 months.
And I'm never going to get that if I do the recap.
True. It's true.
I cheat and use their psychology.
Well, and you mentioned something super important, which is curating the experience.
Yeah.
Every person, not even every group, just every individual responds better to different types of stories, to different types of characters, and otherwise.
Right.
and they interpret them differently. You're absolutely right. I didn't intend him to be creepy, but now I know that that's how you interpreted him,
Right,
or
right.
the whatever NPC. So for sure, it's one of the functions can be, if the recap is done by players, then to obtain the information you need for curating the rest of the experience, which I think is highly valuable for sure.
Hey, thanks.
Now, and fantastically has done so. The thing that I struggle with, I guess, or that is that I play in person. I
Mhm.
only do in-person games. I actually suspended or canceled my Roll20 membership, which means I can still play. I just don't have all the benefits, the fog of war stuff, that sort of thing.
Right, right.
Because I found that since I personally like tactical games much more, it is very difficult to run a well done tactical game online. It is even though you have the tools like vision blurring and that sort of thing, like it does have those advantages. It also is so much slower that it comes to a point where me and my players, which were my friends at the time, I wasn't charging for that one, didn't find it as pleasurable. Didn't find it as, because we were all tactical players. We were all, my brother was a tactical player, all my friends
Have you
were.
played Gloomhaven yet? You're gonna love it.
I have not. And I know that they're coming up with a version 2
Yes. So as a Gloomhaven guy who has bought all the things but is late to the Gloomhaven party, I now have Gloomhaven, Frosthaven, and Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, and the expansion for Gloomhaven.
You do not half-ass anything you do, and I like that.
I do not.
Absolutely.
However, I thought that was the end of it. And a bunch of like organizing stuff. So start with Jaws of the Lion. It's half the price and almost all the game. That's definitely not true. Gloomhaven is enormous, but Jaws of the Lion is a full-blown game for half the price. And it does two things that Gloomhaven doesn't do out of the box. Organize, for starters, which is really nice, because if you've ever set up a mid-crunch board game, that setup can take 45 minutes. Screw that noise. I got things to do. I have ADHD. I need to still want to play the game by the time I've done setting it up.
Agreed.
And it'll teach you how to play. For the first, there's your manual, but there's also a separate smaller booklet that will walk you through one step at a time, each mechanic introduced slowly over the course of, I think, the first 5 levels of the 25 in the box. Well, Big Gloomhaven does not do that. It goes, here's all the stuff, figure it out.
So you actually,
it's a 20-pound board game. That's no, absolutely not.
You bring up something super, super, super important, and you touch on little gems and little gold nuggets without meaning to, my man. You're a savant, and I just have to be paying attention for those things. But you pick up something important, which is you have to want to keep playing once the setup is done, and that falls into the world of the beginning of session recap. Definitely. If the beginning of session recap bums you out, or for whatever reason kind of kills the momentum, then that is one of the things that, like I said, like you mentioned before, get on the same brainwave. Yeah, you're on the same brainwave, but it's one that's like, all right, we're done. I don't want to. But
nobody wants to be here, right?
And that is one big thing to avoid. And it depends on the system, of course, and what you're doing, how long you need to recap. But what I have found is, in my case, I need to kick things off immediately. So for those of you who don't know, for all those who are listening, I run games at a distillery here in Frederick, Maryland. It's called Dragon Distillery, and I'm about to launch. Yeah, I'm about to start launching a couple of recaps, and I'm going to call them Dungeons at Dragon, which is nice because But either way, so what I have is an inconsistent group of players simply because it is a group that gets together, and they don't pay me. They don't pay me at all. But they do come to the distillery, they pay for their drinks, and it's not like they pay to play the game. They don't actually pay the distillery to play the game, but they are doing this because the distillery expects them to, have lunch there, have their drinks there and otherwise. So it is one of the activities that the distillery does to incentivize clientele. However, Dungeons and Dragons and most role-playing games will eventually have a dedicated group of people who come consistently. And that is exactly what I deal with. However, it is not a perfect consistency, which means that some players will come 2 sessions, but then skip 2 and then come another session out after all. But we're playing the same campaign. We're playing the same story. And so I need to get everyone immediately on track. Like, hey, last time this happened, this happened. This is what happened. This is what situation you got yourself into. This is the current status of that situation. And this is what you plan to do. With that in mind, here we go. So the challenge that I have with my recaps is that I need to make sure that whether you skipped last session or not, you are fully ready to make actual effective decisions about your character in this session. So that's a very different problem than the one you have when you have to start off your games. You have a much more continually consistent group at every table, whereas even though I get many of the same players, I don't always get all of them every time. So
That's true.
I cannot rely on player recaps
Mm.
because a player will only be able to recap the sessions they were in, whereas I can recap them all.
So I think another thing that you still can't use because you need to do it. Another thing that puts a point in another reason I do player recap is that I can keep all the notes in the world. One of my players keeps exhaustive notes. I mean, oh my God. Like, when I was younger, I used to be the notes guy. I used to have a giant binder with little bits of paper that were different colors sticking out the top. Bump me and I'm dropping pages all over the floor. I'm going to take an hour to pick them up. It'd be really flustered about it because they go in a specific order, even though it doesn't look like they do. I used to be that guy. Screw that noise. Because here's the only thing that doesn't matter are the things that players care about. That's it. So when you do recap and they do recap, they will tell you about the things they care about. Literally, they'll be the only things they bring up. So if like player A, after, well, I guess that's not true. If you have a player who recaps every little thing, they read it back to you like a computer, you're not actually getting great feedback from them. You're getting great feedback from any player after that who says, hey, what about X? That means that player cares about X, or they wouldn't have brought it up.
To that point, it's still a good opportunity to get everyone on the same brainwave, because once that person does the exhaustive or detailed recap of the other player is now engaged and say, hey, that's not the only thing, this also matters. But in doing so, they're actively playing at that point. Their mind is engaged with the game. For sure.
If I have most of my groups don't have an automaton and a repeating back player like that. Most of them have, we don't have a dedicated note taker. We have whoever does it this time. And then everybody gets involved and they go, oh yeah, but this happened and that happened and that happened. And then I look at all the things I remember that they don't and throw those things away because they don't care. Because if they did, at least one of them would have mentioned it. I don't throw them away till the end of the session because it's entirely possible that player group A will start playing at 6 o'clock and do recap until, I don't know, 6:05, 6:10. And then at 6:30, go, oh yeah, what about blah, blah, blah? Which means you don't, like, after the recap's over, you don't go make edits to your folder. You don't bother until the next day. My notepad, the program notepad that comes with your Windows computer, that's where I keep my notes. It's easy and it's boring and it's simple and it's real small.
So you bring up something again, man, nuggets of gold, my friend. So you bring up something important for any of the people listening here. If you're running more than one table with different groups of people, and especially if they're running different adventures, it is very easy for you, the DM, to get lost as well and forget what it is that they care about. And so at those times that you definitely have to take those notes. Now, in my case, again, I have a big advantage. And for anyone who's thinking of professional DMing, think about knowing what you want to play as well, knowing that you want the story to go to advance and that you don't want it to get stagnant. Also, you don't force the story, obviously, but know what story you're trying to tell. In my case, I only tell one story. So it's the only professional table that I have, which also gives me the advantage of not having to overtax my mind, which is no small feat. I admire what you do, my dear Jay. You call it HDHD, but I call it I don't know what to mention this, but it's different shelves for the size of my brain. You have several of them, so you can keep those things separate. However, what I have found as well is that you and I have a little bit different ways of approaching adventures.
A little bit.
Yours is way more freeform, significantly more freeform, whereas
Yeah,
mine follows an actual story.
10%. It's not.
Well, so I do remember, and I do have to bring this up because I think it's a fantastic thing. The one table that we played together, you DM'd, and I was a player.
Mhm.
I was the note taker because that's just who I am. It wasn't signed or otherwise. And the way that I helped my fellow players is that I wrote my character's journal in character and sent it out to the rest of the group. And that was
You make
my
the
way.
coolest notes.
I thought they were if nothing else interesting. I thought it also was something that the rest of the players could just hold on to as a memento. These were all digital, by the way, for anyone listening. This I didn't do them by hand. I did them in a digital file, but I did make them aesthetically pleasing.
So
as
that
much as
table did
possible.
eventually close scheduling, right? People's lives got
happens.
farther and farther apart. I still have those because they're wonderful.
I don't actually. It's one of those things that got purged when I changed my computer. So
Oh no.
unfortunately, yeah. I mean, it's not the end of the world. I do still have the character sheet though. So the thing about that is that for me, it's always been a continuous story that has a piece of lore in the back that doesn't change regardless of what the player actions are. And what I mean that the piece of lore doesn't change is, for example, the world itself physically is still this continent, and the gods are still these gods, and the forces at play in whatever war is going on or otherwise are the forces at play. It's not like a player will roll a die and then spontaneously a new player or a new political force will emerge that we have never dealt with before. So just to make it easy to follow on, I have a favorite book of all time by Jeff Grubbs called The Brothers' War. It is the story of, it's actually a story in the Magic the Gathering world.
Okay.
And I know that story inside and out. I've read it way many times. I'm steep in the lore. So since my campaign takes place in that world, I know exactly what's going on at all times, and whatever the players are doing. It moves things around for sure, but it doesn't change the objectives of the NPCs. You know, the one wants to win this war, the other one wants to win this way, that sort of thing. So what I'm doing when I'm recapping is, in part, I'm also imparting part of that lore into my players' minds to get them on that same brainwave, so that they remember, oh, that's right, there's this faction, and this is what's going with these people. And so now that they, again, are re-immersed into the world, they know, oh, that's right, these people want this, these people want this. So who am I going to help? Who am I going to hinder? And that helps the ball rolling. So, and part of my recap is not just what happened, is a recap of, remember, this is the world we're in. This is the current fight between these NPCs, and these are the factions and otherwise. And you all have your own alignments with those factions. And now what last thing that happened was this. And we left off, the dragon dropped this character, you almost died. But they got away with your card, which, by the way, is what happened last time. They lost all their stuff. The bad guy actually had to flee. He was losing the fight. And to flee, he got on their wagon, whipped their horse, and rode off.
See, I really appreciate that. I don't think that it's not really necessarily within the bounds of backs catching up at the set table, but I think it's an understated and underutilized thing that really helps sell realism. You don't need gods and standing worlds and local legends, though those are pretty easy to make and really help sell things. You don't need all that stuff to make a world believable. What you need is people who don't wish to die. That's it. Because everybody you know, probably everybody you know, with the exception of zealots, don't wish to die. And not just people, bears, wombats, cats, weasels, dogs. Almost every living thing that is alive would like to stay that way. Like, so what no score is worth dying for. You know why PCs were willing to die? Because they're unusual characters.
Correct.
Because they are zealots for whatever cause the players decided they're zealots for. This also makes it easy for you to sell both the impact and the easy to understand concept of a zealot. When your players are used to fighting regular bandits, even well-trained soldiers, chances are they're not going to die for the cause. Chances are they're going to, at the very least, retreat, if not sell you out. When you encounter a zealot who will absolutely, like bleeding through his teeth, he's dying. He's literally holding his guts in with one hand, spit on you and swing with his other hand. Now you've sold the idea of high impact dedication with no effort. Like, because you didn't sell it now, you sold it back there when everybody else they fought did not die for the cause.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. And that is a point of realism that I do try to bring to my games. But one of the times that you can actually infuse that piece of information is in the description of your factions or in the description of what the events are.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can say like, hey, remember, so the last time that you fought this person, which means that this person has been fought before and survived, and so did you. No one wanted to die. So that you're absolutely right. And I do believe that the recap is a good moment to resell that point, to make sure that you know.
Yeah. I think recaps are also a great time to, and just in general, to reinforce why the players are why last time you checked anyway, the players are doing X. I think it's easy to, particularly if a thing takes a long time, because player agency is a thing and players might take 3 sessions, 8 sessions, forever to get to a specific thing. By the time they get there, they might forget how come they wanted to go there.
Why are we here?
Right. I think that quest rewards, upfront quest rewards, like, why should we do X? Many players in my experience play at least a little bit selfish characters, not because they're unwilling to do X for the cause or whatever, but because they want to know what they're going to get out of it, even if just that thing is the kingdom is safer. That might be enough. But either way, you should say what the standard expectation is. Like, if you go fight the bandits, the king will owe you 1. If you go fight the bandits, that is, the king will owe you 1 is a better reward than you will get to take whatever it is that they got. Because they might have nothing, but a favor for the king is something you get, not something he'll give you later, something you have now that you can pull in, right? It's less vague. Better yet, if you go kill the bandits, the king will give you X pile of predetermined amount of gold. He might throw in more or something, but the players have the expectation of a specific cast in stone reward, which is very clear and easy to understand. It also allows them to immediately decide whether or not that's enough for them.
True. Although in my humblest opinions here, I do believe that you do need a level of player, not character, but player buy-in for the event,
absolutely,
regardless of the reward.
Absolutely. If the players are not interested, you probably cannot offset that with math. And honestly, you shouldn't try. Don't do the thing they want to do.
For sure.
If you can't find common ground between the thing you want to do and the thing they want to do, that's okay. That's okay. That means you're not compatible, and that's fine. At least not in this situation. That's how come that thousands and thousands of teenagers every day put one of those torn up sheets, you pull the bottom off at like a laundromat somewhere that says, hey, I'm putting together a band. And there aren't nearly as new bands as there are those sheets of paper. But all the tabs got pulled because people got together and it didn't work. And that's okay.
Oh no, for sure. And definitely we're doing all this for enjoyment.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise, even, and let me, to whoever's listening out there, even if you become a professional paid dungeon master, you're doing it because you enjoy it, and you need to enjoy it.
You need to enjoy it, even if you're getting paid, because if you don't, that lack of joy will leak across the table and infect everybody else. And no matter how good it still is, it would be better if you liked it.
And here's the thing. You are the player at the table that affects everyone, because everyone interacts with the DM. Two other players can ignore each other,
but nobody can ignore you. Right.
Yep. Without you, there is no game. So absolutely. So if you're actually considering, anyone out there considering doing a professional DM or just DMing for your friends, you have to enjoy it. You are a player at the table. Even if you are the player that holds the most responsibility, you're still a player. It still has to be enjoyable for you. And it is fair to say I'm not enjoying this way, we're not working out.
Right.
Absolutely so.
So whenever I start up a new table, even if it's a table, here's a great example. I did the Mad Mage for the group for, I think it's 2.5 years. We did the Mad Mage.
You sped through that because that could take a long time.
Yeah, I hated it. I hated
Oh.
every other second of it. Oh, it was terrible. They had a great time and I loved being there for them. And it's been a true joy to watch them grow as players. Because when we first sat down, and it is entirely possible they're going to see this video and they're going to know who I'm talking about, and that's okay. When we first sat down to do it, they were old-fashioned players, 10-foot pole, walk 1 square, tap, 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 walk 1 square, tap, 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 walk 1 square, tap. Oh my God, you're driving me crazy. I have rampant ADHD. I'm glad you're having fun. And that's what I'm here for. And I'm glad you're having a great time. But we would go on break and my wife and I would have I would just complain for 15 minutes.
Sure.
And over time they loosened and they were like, okay, they would just zip down the hallway instead. And we went from, oh God, how do I encourage them to take another step, to how do I say there are no traps loud enough to get them to take another step? And then we shifted somewhere along the way into, guys, slow down. I got to tell you what's in that room. It was a lot of fun to watch that change happen. Also, the group I started with wouldn't have dreamed of considering something other than 5e D&D to play.
Sure.
We're going to pick up in a week. We're going to play this. It's going to be fun. Also, shameless plug because they're wonderful and I just gave them shit in case they see this. They sent me this bag, which is like fake leather. It's wonderful. It's supposed to be dragon hide. Cool. And now I own a Zakihedron because they felt the need to send me one, and that's very wonderful of them.
Those things roll like a golf ball.
Yes.
They will keep on going.
Thankfully for me, a different player a year ago or something sent me this dice box, which is lined on the inside so I can roll the thing.
Fantastic. The value of dice trays cannot be overstated.
Oh yeah, I also have a dice tower now because a player refused to not send me one. It's very pretty, but it's not something I ever would have bought for myself.
I agree. Definitely. It's one of the rewarding parts of being the DM. You get a lot more appreciation, and people really do appreciate it.
So that group went from being I can feel the love they have for this, and that's why I'm here. And that is enough to carry me through. But I would love it better if they had this love for something I also love, right? That'd be great.
For sure.
To watch them mutate into, and they were also very stiff socially. Some of them were very hard for me to read at first. And over time that's changed. And the group dynamic has changed a little bit in that different players had to leave and more have joined. And we've kind of settled into a congealed group that shows up every week, right? And a couple of them are in the military, so they'll show up every week for 4 months, and then they have to go do stuff, and then they come back. They still stay in the chat. They're like, "Hey, I just won't be there because I'm on base. I'm in the Arctic." That sucks. Sorry, Bella. And it's been really wonderful to watch them he would kill me if I called it blossoming, so I'm not going to do that.
But to develop their social skills and develop their RP skills, to just develop the skills that make the game flow better and more enjoyable. Right. Sure.
And to trust both me and each other with less shackled math is really wonderful. The Mad Mage has lots of end off in the hallways where it says extended dungeon, which is to say the place where the DM shoved in more shit. And in the beginning, whenever they encountered one of those, they would immediately turn around. The idea of letting me do a thing was not okay. And now they're like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Do the thing.
And they paid me to run it as raw as possible. I literally just had the book in front of me during the sessions, which made my skin crawl because it's not how I do it, but it's what they.
For those of you who don't know, raw means rules as written.
Right. Not rules as interpreted, not rules as you like them. Rules as they are. I fundamentally disagree that D&D has any rules of any kind other than you should all agree to whatever the hell it is that you're doing. Beyond that, I don't really care.
I do believe that most of life should be that way, but that's
agreed. I think ultimately D&D is not a game; it's a form of play. Not all games are play, Not all games are designed to be fun. Monopoly, for example, and that's not sarcasm. It's although
No, it was really
also that.
designed. It was
It's
designed to dissuade people for certain actions.
right.
Sure.
It's literally designed to be not fun. Like that. That's the point.
No, but it's
Any
not.
group exercise you do at your job, it's designed to do trust, to build trust. Those are almost always games, and they're not necessarily designed to be fun.
True.
They're designed to elicit a specific emotional response that is not joy, which is to say,
And teach a
not
lesson.
fun. Right.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So I have to ask.
argument for another time.
So I have to ask because this is no, you're good. You're letting me know that you have a group that had people that did come in and out.
Mhm.
So when someone that came back after a long hiatus because they were on base or whatever it was,
Mhm.
you did mention that they were still maybe in the chat, that they still kept up with a couple of things.
Yeah.
But inevitably, there's a lot that they missed. How do you reintegrate them to where they stand, if not during the opening recap?
So that one table is very strange in that there was almost never any recap of any kind, because we had Roll20 in front of us and they went, this is the room we're in. And then they went, okay, we remember that room, that room, that room. Hey, Jay, what was in that one? Would you remind us? That was it. And then we rolled dice and kept going. Recap took 30 seconds. Like, if it happened at all. That one was very strange. A great time, but very strange.
Well, also it does help, and I cannot stress this enough. There's a very big difference between running a set adventure, whether it's yours or not, but a set adventure that has a determined map and a determined locations and otherwise, than running a free form, kind of a little bit more wherever the dice take us or wherever wins take us. Because in that case, there's a lot more potential to get lost mentally, as in, why are we doing this last week? Why are we here? That sort of thing.
Modules also encourage a specific kind of play. Like Dungeons the Mad Mage, the way we played it, there was no going back to the tavern you come in to get there. What an odd choice that you enter a tavern and then go into its basement and there's a portal to Undermount. What? Anyway,
well, if you've ever been to one of those super secret nightclubs in, I don't know, New York or Sydney or whatever it is, that's what they're like. You're like,
I suppose
you go into this place and then there's a super secret portal to some sort of dungeon. Sometimes it's a whiskey dungeon. Sometimes it's not.
Right. Sometimes it's not. Dungeons and Mad Mage encourages fairly little role play. There are fairly few NPCs for you to get involved with that aren't framed as combat encounters in the book. Obviously, your players are free to communicate with whoever they want to try to communicate with, but the book does not suggest but like 15 encounters in the entire book that are the book. It doesn't offer up suggestions for what would happen if the players chose to speak to them, as opposed to just shoot them. The players figured out pretty fast that, like, one of them took to warlock option. I think they speak other languages.
Sure.
They would encounter a group of warriors, rough up and or kill a bunch of them, take one alive on purpose, and say, hey, you're going to find us. You know where the staircase is to the next level. And they'd be like, they say no. And they go, well, what do you know? And they'd move the sword a little bit, like, say something useful, you're going to die. And that's how we got through levels fairly often. They would grab one and threaten them.
Fair enough.
And if I'd gone ahead and read ahead, if that elf, say, if we were on level 13 and there are more elves of that faction on level 14, then it's entirely possible that this elf knows that. So he had to come from somewhere. Actually, I suppose that's not true. In the Dungeons and Mad Mage, there's lots of things that just don't make sense. Like lots of them. But like the part that really bothered me, probably the two moments that rubbed me the worst with that are, there's a moment where there's a floor that's covered in transmutation glyphs. The player stands on this space. I roll on a chart. They are turned into X thing for X number of turns. A player who everybody liked what they got. It was an accident every time, but everybody liked what they got. One guy became a fire elemental for a while. It was a good time. One of the players who played a ranger, a ranged character on purpose with like a high intelligence skill and dexterity that would challenge people like Legolas, became a hook horror, a big dumb melee fighter. and he
Whoa.
hated every second of it. And I was forced to leave it alone because he paid me to play raw. I would have absolutely lied about what he rolled, except he paid me not to. Like, and I felt
Well,
that's why raw's bad, because in this moment I'm watching this player hate every second of it, and there's nothing I can do.
I have to dispute that a little bit. So as you know, I am very much a rules as written kind of DM,
Right.
with very little exception. And I don't make exceptions. Mostly what I do is interpret things different than what some other people interpret them as raw, but they're still raw. So for my clearest example is, if you throw a bag of holding into another bag of holding, you'll get a hole that absorbs things into the ethereal realm.
Yeah.
One way to interpret that is that if Tiamat's left toe is within that area, all of Tiamat goes into the hole. Another way to interpret, because the language is ambiguous, is it is a 10-foot hole. It goes through, like Tiamat does not fit in a 10-foot hole. So
the bag of holding has a predetermined size on the inside. So I mean, it doesn't hold the dragon. It just doesn't.
So either way, so you can interpret them both ways because the rules are literally written vaguely enough. But either way, so I am very much a rules as written kind of person.
Yeah.
And I run now another thing, and again, I have to stress this. It is because I am paid and because I need to make my games predictable for the paying players. They have to know what their spell is going to do the moment they choose it.
Right.
And not have to wait for me to go over and consult with me, because we only see each other once a month. So we have no time to waste, not to waste, but to spend on finessing rules for your particular character. It's like, if that's what the rule says that the spell does exactly that. And
right.
So that way we can start rolling immediately. And that's one of those, and that's again one of those things that during the recap is enforced. Because what I also do, and this is something that I recommend for those of you who are planning on rolling with a raw kind of mentality, with a rules written kind of mentality, is that recap not only what happened, but sometimes throw in, because you rolled this is what happened, and this is where we stand, and this person did this, and otherwise. And that then when we got to this conflict on this roll that you rolled this sort of thing with this sort of advantage, this happened. So it is a very clear opportunity to reinforce in the mind, and again, it comes back to putting everyone on the same brainwave of what style of game you're playing, even though you're not openly saying this is a rules as written game. You do that at session 0 or at the beginning sometimes or otherwise, but you do reinforce it every time you retell the story of how we got to where we are. And so that's another tool, that's another function, I guess, that this tool, which is the recap, can work for, especially if it's the DM who is giving that recap. And never underestimate the value of embedding information into your story. And one piece of information is exactly that.
I'm real fond of the players walking through the forest and they find, I don't know, a black obelisk that they can't find any way to interact with. They hit it with magic, it doesn't do anything. They scrape their sword against it and it doesn't leave a mark, which is odd, but it doesn't like throw energy or anything. Make it weird, but make it basically uninteractable. Have them make a history check. Oh, I just like that phrase. If they ask to make a history check, say yes, and explain that it's very unusual and it doesn't belong here. But I mean, make it odd and then let them know that it's odd and give them nothing after that. Nothing. Leave it there. Eventually they'll get bored and move on. And 3 months from now, 6 months from now, whatever, you can have the bad guy say, hey, you scraped my thing. Like, I don't like you.
My grandma gave me that on her deathbed.
Right. That's my holy artifact that you fucked up with your sword. Like it's some sort of, what is wrong with you? Do you walk around just scraping everybody's things? And I'm gonna be like, what are you talking about? Because they forgot. I'm sure they did. It's been 6 months. And you go, guys, remember the obelisk that you poked with the sword like 6 months ago in the woods? They were like, he's butthurt about that, and then you just roll from there.
Yeah, no, and as a piece of internal lore for your story, that is fantastic. That is absolutely great. Now, you bring up something that I have heard a lot of complaints about. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but I think it's worth exploring, which is when players ask to roll a skill,
Mhm.
which is something that it doesn't bother me in the sense that it's a peeve or anything like that,
Mhm.
but it signals to me that I have not done enough to reinforce the fact that we are supposed to be playing a role and not rolling dice.
What do you mean?
Rolling dice is just a way to determine the random pieces of the universe. But
Sure.
when you say, can I roll an investigation check? That means nothing to me because it doesn't tell me what your character is doing.
Right.
So
I
most of the times
almost
when
go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. So when my players, and this is something that I recommend for everyone, when my players say, hey, can I roll an insight check for this? And so that's a very common one actually at my table. And
Yes,
I
we
said,
call it rolling for bullshit.
absolutely. And so it depends. So if they're rolling for insight because they already like suspect like, oh wait, this doesn't sound right. Can I like roll an insight check here? And I tell them like, no need to roll. You definitely don't believe this person. You read their face and you do not.
So I
you're not
think that's a
convinced.
useful thing. What you're talking about there, it sounds like assumed competency, which is something I am big on.
Yeah.
So if the players, let's say the player has a passive perception of 17, assuming they see and hear, assuming they experience the world like a human does, because it's the experience I am most familiar with as a fellow human. They use their eyes, their ears like that. And I frame this because Daredevil, the Marvel character, does not see the world like we do. So if
Correct.
you put something over Daredevil's face, it wouldn't make any fucking difference. He would still get a passive perception of 17. If I had a passive perception of 17 and then you wrapped black tape over my eyes, I don't get my passive perception because my inherent ability to detect the world has dropped. So I'm going to be forced
Correct.
to roll. But outside of a situation like that, you cannot roll below whatever your passive skill is. Sherlock
least in
Holmes doesn't
D&D,
roll
correct.
perception checks most of the time. His passive perception is 25, and he doesn't roll lower than that with anybody other than the woman, because whenever they meet, she has done something deliberate to fuck his ability to detect her. Usually getting naked. Because Sherlock gets a lot from how people are dressed and how dirty they are and whether or not they have fibers on them or whatever. Also, he is not comfortable with his emotions at all. So when there's a woman who he finds attractive who is naked in front of him, his entire brain goes.
And
But
that's how we win.
But the rest of the time, passive skills are the way to go. So my players know that, which means when they want to roll and they choose to do so anyway, they are deliberately saying, I understand that my odds can only go down when I go to attack somebody. Those are two different rolls. There's a skill
That is
roll and an
correct.
attack roll. A skill roll, they can't roll lower unless there's a situation in which their passive wouldn't apply. They are only rolling to see if they can get a better result.
Like you said, like if they're blindfolded and that's not their normal
Right, right.
state.
The
For
reason
sure.
for that is I have most of my tables have a thing where once you get 20 nat 20s, you get some sort of permanent character buff.
I remember that.
And
I
they
have
want that.
Yeah, I remember
They
that.
want that. But in combat, if the players have, I don't know, I don't really do balance. So if the players are all level 17 and they encounter a goblin camp with say 8 goblins in it, it doesn't matter, 80 goblins in it. And it looks remotely like the players could just boot stomp their way through this. They don't have to roll for it. I asked them what happens to the goblin encampment. That's it.
And again,
And half the time, maybe more than half the time, they're going to choose to roll out that encounter one attack at a time with dice, knowing that their odds of success can only go down since they started at we win. And now they roll dice, which means now they can roll shitty. Like their odds, you can't, in a binary situation, you can't do better than I win. There's only I win and I lose. So their odds have only gone down and they know it and they chose to do it anyway. And it boggles my mind. I think the answer is players love the sound of dice.
they do. But here's the thing, and this is something that I have learned also that and me as a player, I hate it too, and I didn't notice until it happened. Players hate plot armor.
Yes, very much so.
And saying, hey, you find the encampment, how did you steamroll them? That is 100% plot armor. That means that there is nothing that could happen. Yep, there's nothing that could happen.
You do not have to, if you put me in a room with Andre the Giant is dead, so I would win today. But when he was a Jackie Chan can
Sure.
absolutely kick my ass. There is absolutely no expectation that in any fight I am going to beat him. Rolling dice is not required. The idea that I would beat him is laughable and silly. Like, why are we wasting people's time?
So it is laughable and silly. It is absolutely true. But that die roll represents the ever so off chance that a circumstance that has nothing to do with you or Jackie Chan, a wet and slippery floor or something,
so we could each
made
roll
it
one
so
die.
that happened the other way around.
Right, you're right.
Because
I could roll one die, and if I roll a nat 20, I win. There. We've skipped the whole thing. If you look at the math for 5e and assume a balanced encounter, even at level 1, players will win 75% of the time. And that math will only go up, which means that at level 1, you can roll a d4 and say, hey guys, roll a d4 as a team, just one of you. Roll a d4. If you rolled a 1, you lost. If you rolled anything else, you won. There, done. The math is the same. So why are we bothering? Because players want the flavor. Like that's also, pretty much the only reason.
And keep in mind, most role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons for certain,
sure,
are a tactical battle game. So
D&D in particular, yes.
You come to the table inevitably with the expectation as a player that a fight will happen. But not that a fight will be narrated, but that a fight will occur, that there will be things that happen. People will throw punches, and I will see every punch of it. Now, that being said, this is the opposite of a recap. I have to sign off. I have a couple of obligations to get to.
Oh, no.
However, I took a couple of notes, and I do think that we have a couple of things to go over. Particularly, I'm very interested if in the future we can go over how to handle system by system sometimes when a player says, "Can I roll this?" instead of telling you what the character is doing. And how to finesse that, because I think that is a topic that is well worth exploring.
One of my favorite systems does not have social dice of any kind for that reason. There are no investigation checks, there are no insight checks, there are no charisma rolls. In short, this means you, the player, have to do that. Which on the one hand is great because it commands RP. On the other hand, it's bad because lots of players didn't come to be themselves. They came to be somebody greater than themselves. Or at the very least,
I want to be the most intelligent wizard in the land, even if I'm not the most intelligent person in the room.
Right. How do you play a character who's so much smarter than you? Right. So that's something to talk about. Same time next week.
Same time next week. Same time with Doug. Wait, before we commit to people watching and otherwise.
We're live. Same bad time, same bad channel. I probably can't say that. It's copywritten. Right?
Yep. You know what? Same time next week.